All right, welcome back to another episode of Q&A with T and C. Now, if you are listening to this and you just recently listened to episode 3, you know we are in the midst of a teaser because my good friend sitting over in Thailand right now, 12 hours away, Mr. Christian decided to say, we're going to leave you with a teaser with a 5-letter word that when you come back, we're going to talk about how this word ties into respect. So if you recall on episode 3, we really dove into, hey, what does respect mean in manhood? How important is that to a man? Why does it look different than what how a woman receives love as men receive respect? And that's their interpretation of love. And so I'm just going to keep my mouth shut for a minute here. I'm going to kick it over to the C of TNC and let him drop this 5-letter word on us to kick us off. So take it away, Christian.
All right, thanks, Tim. Hi, everyone. It's good to have you back for this second part of respect. And yeah, Tim's right. We shared a lot about respect and how you cultivate it and a lot of different things. And so the 5-letter word, where's that drum roll? We need a drum roll here, Tim. The drum roll for that 5-letter word is trust.
Absolutely.
Because what we had talked about is to cultivate love, to cultivate respect. What is it rooted in? And I believe and teach, and I think, Tim, you might do the same thing here, is love. The foundation of love is trust, but the
Yep.
foundation of respect is trust as well. And
Yeah,
without
no
trust,
question.
it's hard to love. And without trust, it's hard to respect. And so that is the 5-letter word that we're going to delve into today. How do we honor trust? And how do we grow trust? And how do we demonstrate trust? Both
Mm,
in our families, in our marriages, but also in our relationships, workplace, and so forth. So back to you.
awesome, man. So today we're going to talk about those 3 things. And so let's bring us through this again. So how do we cultivate respect by growing
hmm
trust,
Growing
right?
trust, right?
And what was the second one there? We
That's
have growing
great. Yeah.
trust,
How do we grow trust? How do we honor trust? How do we demonstrate trust?
demonstrate trust.
And
Awesome.
I think I'll tell you what, I'm going to give us something to think about. I remember
Let's
having
do
a
it.
conversation with a man, and the man said, "Okay, all right, I got the idea. I know I need to show trust. How do I do it?" And I was like, "That's
Mm.
great because if we can explain it and bottle it, we can sell it."
That's
And
right.
so
That's
what I shared with
right.
this man, and let's dialogue about this, and let's see what our listeners have to say. Maybe, if they listen to this and share some comments or email us. But I
That'd
think
be awesome.
trust begins with clear communication.
Oh man, you nailed it. You got exactly where I was going. And it's
You know?
interesting because I think there's 2 parts to this, right? So
hmm
the only way that trust gets built, however you want to look at that, is got to be with the 2 magical elements of human relations, and that is communication and time. And so, time being the most equal thing that we all have, I think is the great equalizer for us as men, but it's also the great equalizer really just in the world, right? We're all given a certain amount of time, 24 hours in a day, whatever you want to call it. And if we can invest time wisely, then we can get a good return on that time. And what's most important in our relationships or in our lives is our relationships. And so, how do we make sure that we are dedicating time to go ahead and build trust by communicating well? And so the quality of our communication is also extremely important, right? So I think about with my kids, I have 4 kids ages 11 to 2 now. My daughter just turned 11 the other day. So I'd say pray for me, but she's awesome. So you can still pray for me if you want. And so the importance of me dedicating time through quality communication, because we can sit there and not have quality communication with our spouse, with our kids, right? And what does quality communication look like in order to build relationship and build trust? I believe it's being really intentional about the questions you ask. As Christians, we're called, especially as Christian men, if we're going to build good relationships in our life, then we need to step outside of ourselves and we need to press into the needs of those around us. And what I love about that, what scripture's always taught us, right, is as we begin to do that, we begin to become selfless. We become more self fulfilled. It's like this oxymoron of the world, right? But if we can focus on the needs of others, focus on the needs of our immediate family first, right? Focus on the needs of our relationship with God, but even before our family, then we can really begin to take the time to communicate well, to then build trust. And then out of that trust, we get all this great fruit that comes alongside of that, which is quality relationships. So I don't know what you think the makeup is, Christian, or what you see in Thailand or what you see around the world, but I'd be curious to know, is the formula the same like it is in America,
Yeah, I
around
mean,
the world?
I love what you say. To really have clear communication involves asking good questions. And it reminds me of a conversation that I've had with a man before, and he said, "So wait, communication is just talking, right?" And I said, "No, that's wrong. Because actually
Mm,
moving your mouth is talking, but communicating is the ability to be understood." You see, if I
mm,
move my mouth, words will come out. That's the natural progression of moving my mouth. I move
that's
my
right.
mouth, words come out. But it's a skill to communicate so as to be understood. And I think it's that missing piece that most men struggle with. They think simply
Yeah,
talking is to talk, to share, to ask a question, but actually, two people can talk same culture, same language, and not understand each other. There's
100%
there's
happens in
lots of
America all
people
the time.
today. Yeah, there's still lots of people that have misunderstandings, and there's the word to
Yeah.
understand. So if
Yep.
miscommunication is misunderstanding, then good communication is therefore to understand one another. And
Yeah.
so good communication isn't found in talking more or talking less. It's found in talking well, communicating
Yes.
well, being specific, asking questions, doing the work necessary. So, not that both people agree, because you might have two different opinions, but to
Sure.
be understood so that you can therefore then move forward together. Even with a different opinion, you can still move forward together because you
Yeah.
understand one another. And understanding leads to trust, trust leads to love, love leads to respect. And there is the formula that we need to bottle and put at the local supermarket.
Oh my gosh. Please, we could absolutely. Because I mean, at the end of the day, Christian, we're all after, whether we realize it or not, nobody enjoys poor relationships. Nobody wants strife in their life. Nobody wants to go home and battle with their spouse or battle with their children, right? This is
Well, at
what we're
least most
after.
people.
But most people, I'm going to
Right.
say the majority of people, I'm going to go on a limb here. But the bad part about it, or the hard part about it, is that's exactly what the enemy tries to do, right? He tries to get
Right.
into your relationships, to ruin those, to make those difficult for you to not necessarily think logically, but to lash out emotionally, right? There's all these pieces that he's trying to do to, especially to men, to go ahead and make them ruin or have poor relationships. But if a man can really grasp that the reward of good relationships is going to be unbelievable for his life, for everything, whether it's his interpersonal relationships, whether it's his children, whether it's his business and workplace, whether it's his marriage, whether it's his relationship with his parents. I was blessed, Christian. I don't know if you know this or we've even talked about it, but my dad's an unbelievable man. My dad
Mm.
he's got a degree in counseling. He did early childhood development for 30 some odd years. And he used this
Wow.
phrase all
Wow.
the time that I have taken and put into my life, and it has paid dividends. So here's tool number one I want to give our men today. When you're in conversation, use clarifying questions. And the
Mhm.
best clarifying question you can use, or you can utilize as this tool, is to say, if I'm understanding you correctly, I just heard you say.
Right. Repeat the
So
question back. Right.
somebody communicates with you, says, I'm upset with you because you didn't take out the trash. Whatever. Okay. So I understand you to say that you're unhappy with me as an individual because I forgot to take out the trash. Is that correct? Now, here's the thing. The clarifying question does two things. Number one is it clarifies if there's actually an issue. But the magic of clarifying questions is when you communicate the issue back to somebody, sometimes that person then actually kind of sits back and double checks. Well, maybe what I just said was kind of foolish. It begins to repeat back to them maybe
Right.
something that came out of their mouth that didn't go through the filter, and now they're thinking to themselves, oh, well, maybe I'm not terribly upset with you for taking out the trash. Maybe that's number 15 today on, and 1 through 14 had nothing to do with you. And so now it can be a little disarming. And if we look in a scripture, Christian, who did that well? Jesus did it well.
Jesus.
80% of the time in the New Testament, he was asked a question and he answered with a question. Now, often Times you'll see the makeup. It wasn't a clarifying question. That doesn't change the quality of the tool, but he used this idea of questioning to bring the truth to somebody's attention without them having to be told the truth, right? Because good quality communication isn't oftentimes you beating somebody down and telling them why they're wrong. How do people react to that? They push back,
And let's
right? They're now
also
offended.
right, let's also say that good questions create dialogue.
They do in quality dialogue. And I would
Right.
encourage you, if you're listening to this and you've never looked through the Gospels in that view, go read Matthew, go back through there and just look at how many times when Jesus was questioned, how he turned around and answered it with a question for the purpose of bringing the truth
Right.
to that person's attention
Right.
on their own. So that's tool number one, right? Let's talk about how that tool, and my dad was such a good example, and I use it all the time today in my professional life. I oversee over 200 people in an organization. I directly mentor probably between 30 and 40 of them. And oftentimes when I'm engaging in a problem or engaging in something that has to come to a solution, and I even use this with my superiors, as I'll say, so just so I understand, what I heard you say is X, and it really helps that dialogue. And so that's one of the tools I just wanted to throw in there as we talk about communication, because ultimately what's going to happen as well is that will cultivate respect, because it also tells the person you're talking to you're listening. You value what they have to say because you're repeating back exactly what they said. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
I mean I love it. Yeah, I mean it's like communication, listening, trust, love, respect. It's this circle of life, so to say, the
Mm-hmm.
life-giving foundation of relationships. Now, I can imagine a man's listening to him and thinking, okay, that's great. So you grew up with a counselor, you guys do this as your
I
ministry.
know.
You guys are just gifted with communication. And my response
No.
to that man is wrong.
Yeah,
Now,
I
here's the
agree.
thing, communication is a skill. Now,
It
look,
is.
okay,
It's a
some
muscle.
people, right, some people have the natural gift of communication, but
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't mean that communication is not a good communication is not available to all. You can
Yep.
work at
Agreed.
it. And I
Yep.
challenge men all the time. You know how to communicate. You do. Because the truth of the matter
Mm-hmm.
is, if you didn't know how to communicate, you wouldn't be at your job.
Correct.
Okay, so actually, you do know how to communicate. You know how to communicate because your job depends on it, your bills depend on it, your salary depends
Yep.
on it, your lifestyle depends on it. So actually, you know how to communicate. But what I find a lot of men struggle with is they come out, they come home from work, and somehow they're like, I'm at home. So therefore, all the skills I have at work, I don't need to use at my home. And I'm like, because no, like there's men at work, you're not gonna be rude to your boss. You're not gonna withdraw if you're a boss.
Correct.
You're not gonna be silent. You're gonna communicate,
Yeah.
you're gonna engage, you're gonna ask questions, you're gonna have a relationship with the people that you work with. How much
Yep.
more important it is to take the same skill you can use from 9 to 5, from 5 to 9 when you come home.
Yep.
And I have a
Man.
good friend,
Yeah.
and he says, look, if I'm gonna fail, I'd rather fail at home, or I'd rather fail at home at the office. Why?
Yeah.
Because I can always get another job.
Absolutely.
I can
Man,
always get another
I
job.
could, yeah. And what you're beginning to peel back really is, the prioritization of manhood. Are we as men willing to prioritize the most important relationships that we have in an order that God honors? And if you look in Psalm 128, it is written from a Hebrew perspective, but man, it lays out your vertical alignment. It lays out your priorities, and it completely flips everything that the world tells you on your head, right? Give 110% to your job, you come home burnt out, you got nothing left. No, life is, in a sense of things, life is a balance where you're making sure that you're balancing out your relationship with God, and then your relationship with your wife, and then your relationship with your kids, and then your relationship with your extended family, and then your relationship with your work or your mission field, and then your relationship with your community. And that's very clear. The Bible is very clear about that. It's very clear in creation order. It's very clear all throughout the scriptures. It's very clear if you were to understand or look at Jewish culture. Very, very clear. That's always been the alignment for God, that your work actually comes fifth in the vertical alignment for your life. So therefore, the quality of your communication should go in that order, right? I should be making sure that I'm communicating in a quality way with the King of the universe. Then I'm communicating in a quality way with my wife next, right? And what I teach our guys and some of the guys I mentor is that, if you're not willing to step out of a meeting and answer the phone for your wife. My wife and I have this rule that if she calls twice, It is something either an emergency or important. It's the two-time rule.
Mm.
And if I'm going to honor God, I'm going to step out of a meeting. I'm going to step out of whatever's going on. I'm going to say, excuse me. I'm going to get up and I'm going to take a phone call because you nailed it, right? If there are probably still even today hundreds of thousands and millions of jobs available out there, but I don't get to do my relationship with my wife right again. I don't get to do my relationship with my kids right again. I get one shot at this. And when we can have a different focus about that in our life as men, and we have a different priority about that as life as men, man, that changes everything because now we're talking legacy. Now we're talking what we're going to be building into when we're gone, right? And I've seen it numerous times. I've been in the current profession I'm in for over 10 years now. And before then, in similar professions. But the crazy thing is, and it's a shame in a way, but many people after they retire, you know how many people remember that person's name in my organization? Not many, right? And I'm not trying to be the guy that punches, that's the punching you in the eyes today or square between the nose, but it's like I understand your drive to provide men. I get it. I have the same drive, but that drive cannot, let's not misprioritize that, right? So as we
So
talk
is,
about priorities and we go ahead, jump in.
well, I was just going to say, it almost sounds like here, I'll ask a clarifying question. We're going to honor your dad here. So what I'm hearing you say is
Nailed it.
there's godly priority, but we have to be careful not to make an idol out of something. Is that right?
100%. And I will tell you, you nailed it. This is probably what maybe we should look at our next episode because this will take forever to peel apart. But idol worship is a real thing, and it is something that is anything that you're going to put above or put out of prioritization in your relationship, in your vertical alignment is what I like to call it when I coach men. Is your vertical alignment out of whack, and you cannot create idols in your life because they suck the life out of you. They distract you from your relationships in your life that are most important. And truly, I mean, if we think back to biblical times, all they're going to do is bring you pain. I mean, that's kind of what I coach guys on. Hey, listen, if you're going to worship an idol, expect pain. God is a jealous God. He does not want to share the worship
Mm.
of him with anything else in your life, and that's just his economy. That's how it works. So as we
All
kind of
right.
come full circle,
Yes. So
let's think about
I think that's a teaser for the next episode, right?
so
Right. A little
when we
teaser, the idol. But you know what's good because I got a final thought on the respect thing as well as
yeah, do it.
can you here's a question to kind of make people want to come back next time is can you make your family an idol? Can you make your
Absolutely.
marriage an idol? So
100%.
all
100%.
right.
And we don't have time to
So
dive into that now. But what I'll say is, as we come full circle here and we think about how does that work in communication? So communication that eventually builds trust, that eventually, is communicated through love, that ends up building respect. That magical formula we're talking about today, when we come full circle to that, that also has to be done inside in these priorities, right? And we have to make sure that we're communicating in a way that is a skill set, but is also something that God honors when you begin to put this into practice. God will help you hone these skills. He wants you in a good relationship with Him. He wants you in a good relationship with your wife. He wants you in a good relationship with your children. He wants you to take that first step, and you would be amazed about how quickly your relationships will get better because you're actually trying. What I have found, at least in the Western world, Christian, is men just don't want to try. They don't want to try. They don't want just want to sit home and go, you know what? I'm going to go home and I'm going to ask my wife if we can sit down and talk. First of all, she might pass out for some of the people, right? But for a lot of, she's going to light up. Next thing you know, 10 or 15 minutes into her conversation, you may have asked 3 questions, and
mhm.
she is being able to connect with you emotionally, right? She's being able to relate to you. She's now all of a sudden feeling fulfilled, which is building trust, which all of a sudden out of that conversation, her respect meter has gone through the roof. And what are you after as a man? Her respect.
Respect, love, trust, understanding. I mean, I love what
Boom.
you say. It's almost a springboard I want to take. You actually said a lot of men don't like to try. And a lack of trying is found in presumption and assumption. And I already know what she's going to say.
Yep.
Those are the nails in the coffin to good communication, honoring communication, healthy communication, which then lay the
Yep.
foundation for love, trust, and respect. And I
Yep.
think what I would want to try to challenge men on is if you want respect, don't assume. If you want trust,
Correct.
don't presume. If you
Mm-hmm.
want if you want love, don't think you know what the other person wants. It's okay to talk it out. Now, I can also imagine some men say, okay, so this is great, but you don't know my child. You don't know
Oh
my wife. You don't
man, you're
know my
my brain.
work. And
Hmm.
and my thing is and I'd agree. I don't know your wife. I don't know your children. I don't know where you work. But what we're not talking about is how to make others walk this out. It's how do you walk it out so that you can begin to set the example for others to
Absolutely.
follow.
Yeah.
And communication is hard. And I just want to encourage men, look, if you're not a good communicator or you think you're not a good communicator, that's okay. Because you know what
Yep.
my mama said? My mama never said practice makes perfect. My mama always said
Mm,
practice makes better.
yes.
Practice
100%.
makes better. And I just find it so frustrating sometimes where men are like, well, I can't be perfect. Great. I never asked you to. Neither did Jesus.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
that's not an excuse. Instead of looking in God's word or in the world or your culture or your family or your situation and look for an excuse not to do something, look for a reason to do something.
Exactly.
What are the reasons that God gives you to do something?
Yep.
To build that relationship with Him, to honor, to love, to respect, to understand. That's the reason why we practice. That's the reason we pursue to be better. That's the reason we say, even if no one else does it, I will do it so that I can set an example for others to follow.
Yep. I completely agree with you. And I think what we're saying here, and very important for a man to hear this, is we're not saying that the woman doesn't have, or especially your wife, excuse me, your wife, Ephesians 5, you can look at it. She has a biblical mandate to communicate and show you respect. You have a biblical mandate to communicate and show her love. So we're not saying that the children don't have a biblically commanded role. We're not saying that the woman doesn't have a biblically commanded role. But we have to remember that when God when he created order in the garden, he made you as the leader. He created you first. He gave you responsibility. He gave you your identity to serve and protect. He put all these things. He gave you the responsibility to make sure Eve didn't eat of the apple. And we don't have time to really get into that. That's a whole nother conversation. But that begs the question, okay, so if I'm the leader of my household and the communication or the respect or the love is broken, who takes the first step? Because that's the key for me, right? This is something I had to learn. I used to get all hung up on the fact that, well, my wife should respect me. Well, what if it's broken? What if the love is broken? What if the respect is broken? What if the communication is broken? Who makes the first step? And the answer is you as a man. It's always the answer is you as a man, that you're going to make the first step. And I have seen it, and this, I don't, you can agree with me, disagree with me on this one, Christian. I don't think we've ever talked about this. Is I have seen where the woman tries to come forward and to mend the relationship. That's great. Nothing wrong with that. But until the man comes to a point of humility, all right, we can start talking about this now. Humility, which then allows him to come forward and say, hey, listen, I understand the love is broken. I understand the respect is broken. I understand the communication is broken. I want to fix it. What do we need to do to fix it? And I'll tell you, a couple of weeks ago, this happened. My wife and I can't remember what it was that we were talking about. We had a disagreement on something, and I could feel that it had put a wedge in our marriage. And so I let things cool off, which is another tip. Sometimes, guys, you just got to let things cool off for a little while. And I went back to her and I said, I went into the bedroom and I sat down. I said, hey, listen, I apologize. I don't know how this got to the point of where it is, but I just want to make this right. How do we fix this? And that opened up the conversation for us to have a very good, communicating, heartfelt, cordial conversation where we got on the other side of it. Because man, you have a choice. And the choice is either you're going to lead in a resolution or you're going to let it fester to the point where it is going to become toxic. And that is dangerous. Now we start talking about big time issues, right? That can fester and become problems, and then it can snowball.
Wow. So
And so
instead
that
of
was
it sounds like instead of fixing it, you healed it.
all right. You're going to have to expound on that, man. You can't just drop bombs like that.
Well, I think we're gonna have to take that up in a future episode, but I think sometimes, I mean, I like what you did because it doesn't sound like you fixed it. It sounds like you healed it. Let's
Hmm.
talk about it. Where do I need to repent or forgive? Where do I
Yep.
need to ask for forgiveness? Instead of just saying,
Yep.
okay, we disagree, let's move on. You didn't move on, you moved forward. I love that, Tim. That's a great
Yes.
example. But I want to make a point for our single listeners because there
Please.
might be a single listener listening and being like, all right, So I'm not married. So
Yeah.
this episode has nothing to do with me because you guys keep talking about your
Oh
wives.
gosh, that's not true.
Right, which is true. I am married. So for me to not bring in that aspect of my life would be unfair to the lessons that I've learned
Truth.
in
Great
marriage.
catch though. Talk to the singles.
But for single men, you might think, well, okay, so how do I do this? Again, we're not talking about marriage, we're talking about relationship. So, unless you're some mountain man on the top of a mountain in Alaska surrounded by nothing but trees, there's actually principles that you can learn in this. The principle is
Yep.
humility, the principle is refining the skill of communication, understanding that
Hmm.
the purpose of communication isn't to talk, but to be understood, and that trust and love and respect you desire, and you can cultivate it. And again, you cultivate it through refining the skill of communication. So I just want to encourage single men, if you learn this now, or if you begin to learn it now, it's almost a gift that you bring into your marriage.
100%.
It's
Man, I
almost, I
couldn't
mean,
agree more.
you're not just bringing an air fryer or a rice cooker or a new car or an amazing honeymoon. You're bringing a gift that will last and be used every day of the remainder of your union. And I'll tell you something, Tim,
Yes.
there's no air fryer that lasts that long.
No, there's not.
And so that would be my encouragement to single men. It's, if you're not yet married or you're not yet engaged, great. Work on this now. Learn it now. Refine it now. And then when you
Yeah.
are married, you're able to tell your wife, I have worked on what I think is the greatest gift that I can give you, the gift
Yep.
of good communication, building trust, showing love, cultivating respect, because I love you.
Yeah. I think it's great. And I think for single guys out there, it's important to remember that we typically, I will say typically because it's not always this way. It depends on a lot of family background and upbringing, but typically a woman is a better communicator. She's more emotionally in tune. She wants to have a deep dive into how she's feeling. And it's because they're wired differently than we are. So as you sit back as a single man and think to myself, man, how can I be really effective as a future husband? That's the key, man, right there. And I will tell you, there's a plethora of good communicating tools out there that you can get your hands on. John Maxwell has a fantastic book on communication. Part of what I do in my professional life is like I said before, I mentor people in our organization, and oftentimes I run into this. How do I want to become a better communicator? It's the first book that I will always recommend is John Maxwell's book on communication. And you can look it up. You can, it's very easy to find. It's been around forever. And so really what we're saying, is how do I build myself as a single man into a very good communicating leader, because that's what we're after here, right? We're going to be called to lead our families. We're going to be called to lead our wife. And one of the most important things in leadership is, how do I communicate well? And that's as a single man, gosh, the reward of that is paramount. And the reward of
Right.
being a good communicator doesn't just stop in your marriage. It goes all the way down that vertical alignment. Now I know how to communicate with my kids, right? Because now you can begin to communicate on their level, right? I can't, the way I communicate with my 2-year-old is a lot different than the way I communicate with my 11-year-old, right? And so you learn these skills, but then it makes you more an effective parent, right? And then we
Yep.
talk about our extended family. Now you know how to communicate with your extended family, which is challenging sometimes. How do I have hard conversations with people in my extended family if they need it? How do I build good relationship with them? And how do I make sure that family unit is going to be God honoring, right? And then I work down to my work and my mission field. Everything revolves around the relationships that you cultivate based on how well you communicate, which builds trust. And I will throw another one out here too, we can talk about maybe as we get toward the end of our time here, is it develops security for people. People feel secure because they can talk to you. They understand that you're going to be, level headed, if you will, that you're not going to fly off the rails, that you're going to listen well, and that they're going to be heard. And that makes people feel safe. That makes your wife feel safe. If you're single, that makes your coworkers feel safe. Your friends feel safe. And I'll tell you, case in point, my wife, a friend of ours from down the street, gave her a call yesterday and said, "Hey, I'd like to talk to you." And this isn't normal behavior for this person. And so my wife texts me on the way home from work, and she says, "Hey, so and so wants me to come over and speak with her." And I thought, wow, okay. And immediately, because my wife and I are so connected, it was easy for me to understand that, okay, this is somebody reaching out for help. And that's exactly what it was. And that person said something profound to my wife. She said, you know, I don't feel anxious when you're here. And she struggles with anxiety. Said, I don't feel anxious when you're here. And really, that's the fruit of being disciplined and working on our communication for both my wife and I. My wife's an excellent communicator, where she could go sit and then bring some peace, bring God's peace into a situation where a woman is struggling to communicate. So, kick it over to you, Christian, with some final thoughts here on how that creates security.
Yeah, I just want to encourage, ourselves and any listener, this is respect part two. And men want to be respected. And if you look back at episode one, we talked about cultivating respect, respect for God's creation, respect for roles, respect for character.
Yep.
So if you want respect, cultivate trust because it's hard to respect somebody that you don't trust.
Amen.
Then, if you want to go down another level, well, how do you cultivate trust? By having a foundation of good communication.
Yep.
And then somebody might say, well, again, I'm not a good communicator. That's right. This is not a competition. There's nobody going to win Best Communicator of the Year award, but you
That's
have the ability, you have the skill, and you always have the choice to refine the skill of communication.
that's right.
I can't guarantee it because I don't know the future, but I'm pretty confident that if men work on communicating, learn the skill of communicating, refine the art of communicating, they'll find that the trust meter shoots through the roof. And
Agreed.
when that trust meter shoots through the roof, the respect doesn't have to be earned. It will just come naturally because you've created a foundation where people, as you said, feel safe, trustworthy, and loved. Good
Yep.
communication is the foundation of respect. And communication, again, leads to trust. Trust leads to respect. Respect is what we want. So now the challenge is what's stopping you from being respected? Nothing.
That sounds like part three.
Does that sound like part three? Could be. So my
No,
encouragement
nailed it.
is
Go ahead, finish that thought.
right. There's nothing that's keeping you from learning respect, trust, and
Yeah,
communication,
agreed. Agreed.
except one thing: laziness and apathy.
Yep. Which will kill you at the end of the day. And that is a losing formula for a man, right? I don't know any man that
Right.
thinks, man, if I'm just lazy and apathetic, I'm going to win in life. It just doesn't happen, right? Listen,
Well,
guys, thanks again for go. What you got? Get a final thought?
no more final thoughts, or we're going to be here all night, all day, and
That's
all
right.
night.
That's right. That's right. Well, hey, it's morning for me. It's night for you. Almost night for you. Listen,
Well,
everybody,
gonna,
thanks for tuning in once again to Q&A with TNC. We are blessed and privileged that you decided to tune into us today, and we will keep producing this material. We feel called to do it. I know Christian feels called to do it. I feel called to do it. And our goal really of Q&A of TNC is to answer these hard questions, to work alongside of the men of the world to help them understand, walk in victory, increase their relationships around them that are going to be bearing great fruit, and ultimately to build a kingdom. What do
and
you
to
got,
be
Christian? Anything to any
and to
go
be Christ-like, to be
and to be
Christ-like.
Christ-like? Yep, which is paramount amongst everything else.
Gentlemen, if you want to know more about what we do, you can check out The Prodigal Man on the web or the MST Project, learn more about the ministries that Tim and I are involved in. And of course, you can also email us, either one of our ministries, with questions that you have. And we'd love to tackle those questions. And we tackle those questions not because we think we have all the answers, but we've learned lessons. We've cultivated wisdom and we have shared experiences that we think are going to bless you and encourage you as you learn, as we're learning to be more Christ-like in today's world. So thank you, Tim, for this time. Thank you for our
You too, brother.
listeners, and we'll see you again.
See you next time.